Let's talk a variant rule from the player's handbook about ability scores and not the and ability checks, not necessarily being tied to the ones that you think. I saw this going around Twitter, and while I have already made a video about this probably 3 years ago, nobody goes back and watches those old videos, and the production quality is rough, and I put music over it, and people find them hard to watch. Although it is an interesting to see me with less hair, no gray, and in a completely different backdrop than what you see here. So if you want to go back, you can do that. But if not, I'm going to talk to you about it right now. So stay tuned. Oh, variant skills. I was thinking about backgrounds. That's the next video I'm going to make. Oops. What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here. And it is actually a very interesting rule that kind of made sense, and I feel like people have done this in the past, and you may have done this in your own game and not known that it was a variant rule. But actually, the way I learned about it was from the Adventures League, because if you know about the Adventures League, it is organized play, so they have to follow a relatively stringent set of rules to ensure that if I show up at the same game store every week to play a game, and then I travel across the country or across the world and go play at somebody else's table, I'm still playing with the Adventure League rule set, so we're all making characters, on the same, based on the same thing. So that is a pretty cool concept. But they basically say in there, like, you have to follow all the rules as written. There's no like room for interpretation, making up stuff. The only rules that are not hard and fast set rules or certain variant rules are available to you, and one of those is the variant rule skills with different abilities. So it's in chapter 7 of the player's handbook, and you can see it's right here under skills. Normally, your proficiency in a skill applies only to a specific kind of ability check. Proficiency in athletics, for example, usually applies to strength checks. In some situations, though, your proficiency bonus may reasonably apply to a different kind of check. In such cases, the DM might ask for a check using an unusual combination of an ability and skill, or you might ask the DM if you can apply a proficiency to a different check. For example, if you have to swim from an offshore island to the mainland, the DM might call for a constitution check to see if you have the stamina to make it that far. In this case, the DM might also allow you to apply your proficiency in athletics and ask for a constitution athletics check. So if you're proficient in athletics, you can apply your proficiency bonus to the constitution check you would normally apply for a strength athletics check. Similarly, when you're half-orc barbarian, this is the quintessential example that always comes up. Similarly, when your half-orc barbarian uses a display of raw strength to intimidate an enemy, the DM might ask for a strength intimidation check, even though intimidation is normally associated with charisma. So this is a very simple rule. That last example is one I'm sure that's come up countless numbers of times at your table, and it definitely has come up at mine. And I really like this rule because it really stretches the imagination and makes the players have to think, right? Maybe you can come up, some of them are easy. Maybe I'm a book-learned person and I read a ton of books about medical theory, right? So when I go to make an intelligence check, I'm not making a wisdom intelligence check, as in like I understand how this works. I'm making an intelligence medicine check. A good way that I think to describe it would be like, in theory, I might not know how to swim, but maybe I read every book that tells me how to swim. So you could try to make the argument like, I want to make an intelligence athletics check for swimming, testing my knowledge because I read the statistics and I read the books that tell me this is the proper procedure and this is how you're supposed to move your arms and when you're supposed to breathe for swimming. I might have never actually done it, so I don't have the physical skills to do it. So maybe you'll let me make that intelligence athletics check. Probably not, because I would also argue on the other side of that coin, reading about how to swim is exceptionally different than actually swimming. But you get my point. So I really like the idea of this. Maybe your Arcana checks are wisdom-based, because let's be honest, maybe you're a wisdom-based character or a charisma-based character, so you obviously are probably going to dump intelligence. So Arcana is typically an intelligence skill, but like maybe my Arcana knowledge comes from me hanging around other people who use magic. So it's more of like a street smarts wisdom based Arcana check rather than like I studied the tomes and the text and the theory of magic to be an intelligence Arcana check. There are other examples of other things out there that you could do. I'm sure you can think of plenty of options where you can make dexterity athletics checks or even strength acrobatics checks. I feel like doing kind of like an Iron Cross scenario with the rings where you're holding yourself out like that, you might argue that could be an athletics check. You also might argue that could be an acrobatics check because you're doing lots of flips and stuff and you're trying to hold yourself in maybe a slightly acrobatic pose. Maybe it's strength acrobatics. I don't know. There's a ton of different options, and I'd love to hear your most interesting combination of an ability score and a skill check in the description down below, and tell me whether or not you created it, the DM created it for you to do, and then if it was like whether it passed or failed, or was that something like you pitched to the DM, like I really want to make this charisma sleight of hand check, and the DM was like, explain to me how that works, and you managed to do it, and I want to know if you either failed or succeeded on your attempt to make that happen. So let me know what you all think about this in the comments down below. I think it's a very useful rule. I think, again, the strength intimidation is the quintessential example, but let me know. Thank you to my patrons on Patreon for continuing to support the channel. If you haven't subscribed already, I would love it if you did so, but don't feel obligated if you don't want to, and I will see you all next time.